Alright, let's do this one last time. My name is Chaze. 3 years ago, I started making ranking videos on this godforsaken website. And ever since then, I've been on the quest to rank every movie ever. Not literally though. I've ranked Pixar, DreamWorks, Star Wars, made a second channel, tried out gaming videos for a while, did a live stream which went absurdly wrong. No, wait, don't unsub, don't unsub, no, wait. No. But after everything, no matter how many hours day in, day out watching, scripting, editing, and not uploading, I always find a way to come back stronger than ever. And I know that after this video, I will have forever cemented my place in history as the guy who wasted countless hours of his life ranking every Sony movie. Cue the intro. Okay, it's been a while since I've done this, so let's see here. Yes, the first movie, Open Season. Open Season might be the blandest debut movie for any animation studio I've ever seen. This movie doesn't really try at all to be anything more than a generic cash grab caricature of the animated movies that were being released at the time. But at the same time, that doesn't mean it's necessarily that bad. So this movie starts and introduces us to our main character Boog and his caretaker Beth. And Boog is basically this sheltered grizzly bear used as a local attraction. After his show, this hunter called Shaw basically pulls up next to Boog's car with his deer named Elliot tied to the hood of his car. Elliot then wakes up and begs Boog to free him, which he does. Later that night, Elliot tracks down Boog in his garage and basically peer pressures him to leave his house. And together they go to a local convenience store and get absolutely hammered. Boog then gets caught and is taken back home, and the next day Elliot returns and pretty much ruins Boog's whole show, leading to the audience thinking he was feral. And then Boog gets tranquilized and dumped off into the wild. I wonder where I've seen this plot before. Boog then reluctantly teams up with Elliot to try and figure out a way to get back to town. And the next 30 or so minutes are basically Elliot and Boog exploring the wilderness and getting their asses absolutely handed to them by the wild animals. There's also this deer voiced by Patrick Warburton, which caught me so off guard. He was kind of funny. Anyways, because Elliot is a complete dumbass, they get nowhere and run into Shaw. Boog then attempts to run away, but then accidentally destroys the beaver dam, leading to all the animals somehow getting washed up and ending up in the hunting grounds. Boog and Elliot have the classic falling out moment, and then Boog wanders off. For some reason, Boog ends up at Shaw's cabin, and then they pull the classic Goldilocks reference on us.
Somebody forgot to flush!
Boog escapes Shaw, but goes back to the animals to reconcile and come up with a plan to defend themselves against the hunters coming back due to it being open season. And the animals basically go to war and overpower all the hunters and win. And then Beth returns to bring Boog home, but Boog declines and decides to live in the wild. The end. Yeah, this movie was basically just Madagascar and Over the Hedge combined. I guess Sony were trying really hard to copy the formula of DreamWorks movies so that their debut film wouldn't flop. And judging by the amount of open season sequels, I would assume that it worked pretty well. But this also comes at the cost of creating the most predictable and substance-less movie I've ever seen. I guess I can commend the hunter villain for being the only remarkable and funny character about this movie, but other than that, Open Season is a mid-movie with pretty unlikable characters and unfunny jokes. I think I'll put this in C tier. Surf's Up is a big step forward from Open Season. This movie actually gave me a sliver of hope that I wasn't wasting my time reviewing Sony movies because it actually wasn't half bad. I also find the whole documentary reality show style creative and innovative. Like the way the story is told is basically like something from The Office, which is pretty cool. So the plot starts off simple, showing our main character named Cody Maverick, who's basically an aspiring surfer inspired by the likes of this other famous surfer, Big Z, who unfortunately died in a surfing accident. One day a surfing scout visits his hometown of Antarctica, and after failing to audition for him, Cody basically swims to his whale and they sail off into Penghu Island. Cody then meets this guy called Tank Evans and challenges him to a surfing duel, which he loses horribly, and this causes him to go into hiding days before a big surfing competition. He gets rescued by this lifeguard called Rainy and her uncle named Geek, but as it turns out, Geek is actually the surfing legend Big Z himself, who also went into hiding after losing to Tank Evans. Big Z then pretty much trains Cody to try and prepare him for the competition. On the day of the competition, Tank Evans and Cody basically try and murder each other, and this leads to them taking a detour off into the boneyard. Cody almost drowns, but then is saved by Big Z at the very last second. And then Big Z returns to the island with Cody revealing he wasn't actually dead. The end. So yeah, Surf's Up was actually pretty good from start to end. The whole plot of Cody striving to follow his dreams of being a surfer was done very well, and every character was also pretty likable and enjoyable. I honestly didn't expect to like this movie this much, but it was such a fun and easy watch. All I can say is I sure hope the sequel could live up to this one. A tier. But first, a quick word from the paid partner of this video. BetterHelp! If you've been feeling stressed, overwhelmed, or just not quite yourself lately, therapy can definitely make a huge difference. So I guess you could say you'd better help yourself to some. Personally, I've always been struggling myself to balance the stress and anxiety of doing YouTube with, well, doing YouTube. Spending 25 hours a day staring at graphs, analytics, procrastinating, the numbers. Mason, the numbers, what could they possibly mean? And as someone who would rather not leave his house at all, online therapy like this is exactly what I need in order to vent out my frustrations to someone who actually has their life put together and change my mental state for the better. We have several different qualified therapists, such as this motivational Japanese guy, random homeless man we found on the street, and even low-tier God himself, all ready to help you at any time, unless of course your card declines.
You serve zero purpose.
Okay, but in all seriousness though, therapy is low-key pretty cool. And if you ever want to try it out, then head on over to betterhelp.com/Chaze to get 10% off your first month, because sometimes existing can be exhausting. Back to the video. Open Season 2 is a complete and utter brain rot movie, and I hate it very much. Imagine taking what is already a bland and forgettable movie and making it even worse and more nonsensical than it already is. And that's pretty much Open Season 2. So remember Elliot from the first movie, who was already quite literally Satan reincarnated? Yeah, this movie basically makes him the main character and makes him way more annoying than he already was. The whole plot basically revolves around Elliot getting married, but he folds at the very last second and runs away from the altar. There's also this German Dachshund dog that gets kidnapped by his old owners, and the whole story is about the animal gang trying to rescue him. At the same time, there's this whole group of domesticated pets that try to brainwash the Dachshund dog, but then he escapes anyway. I don't even understand this plot, bro. Like, half this movie is filler, and they pad it out by adding the dumbest scenes revolving around this dumbass deer. Like, I want to murder him so bad. I swear, this whole thing could have been like 25 minutes, but for some reason, there is so much filler. Fast forward a bit, and the animals reach this pet paradise place and infiltrate it undercover. But then they get captured by the domesticated animals. Then we got this random white dog who's also the villain of this movie, and he basically tries to murder everyone. And then the animals all fight back, and in the end, the wild animals win. Also, the Dachshund dog decides to run back to his owner at the very end, so the whole plot was quite literally all for nothing. Yeah, all in all, this movie sucked massive balls. They kind of gave this sequel the Cars 2 treatment of making the annoying side character take the wheel for some reason, and it just never works. The plot is stupid, the characters are stupid, the animation looks less than good, and for that, it's going E tier. Y'all, this movie is actually so peak, it's astounding. This movie is genuinely the most well put together movie I've seen from this studio in terms of story, characters, and humor. It's just great. So, the plot of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is about this kid called Flint Lockwood. And Flint is pretty much a mad scientist inventor with wacky and zany inventions like spray-on shoes and ratbirds. Anyways, Flint decides to unveil his new invention, which is this machine that turns water into any type of food. But on the day of his unveiling, Flint's machine goes out of control and launches up into the sky, siphoning out clouds to use as a water source and making it rain food. Flint also meets this reporter girl called Sam, who conducts a weather report, making Flint and his invention famous. Flint then proceeds to take the town's requests and make it rain different types of food on different days. But then the machine starts malfunctioning and somehow mutates the food, making it larger. So then Flint, Sam, and this random ass naked guy take his flying car and fly off into the clouds to try and locate the machine and stop it. There's also this really funny scene where Flint is trying to communicate with his dad to send him a file of a kill code, and it just never works. Eventually, Flint reaches the machine but is given the wrong file by his dad to stop it. So instead, he uses his spray-on shoes, effectively shutting off the machine permanently, and the end. Honestly, my summary of this plot does not do it any justice, but this movie is on a whole nother level. The humor is so goofy and witty and sometimes weirdly out of pocket, and the writing is really breathtaking as well. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller really knocked it out the park with this one, because the whole vibe really did feel similar to their other films like Spider-Verse and the Lego Movie. So yeah, definitely go watch this movie. It is really good. Well deserved S tier. Open Season 3 is so bad that it shattered what little hope I had for this franchise in the first place. This is genuinely the first movie I saw so far that made me want to erase the memory of watching this and take back my 1.5 hours. So, Open Season 3 centers around the main bear Boog this time instead of his chopped friend Elliot. And Boog is pretty much sad because everyone has a girlfriend or wife and no one wants to hang out with him. Then one day he stumbles upon the circus and switches places with the circus bear. And the circus bear pretty much goes back to the forest and enslaves the other animals. Meanwhile, Boog falls in love with this female circus bear. Then all the other side characters character animals rescue Boog, and then the female bear falls in love with him, and then they switch with the fake Boog and live in the forest. The end. Yeah, there's really not much to say at all. Somehow this movie has the most linear, simple plot, yet has the most filler out of all of these movies by far. So much random padding and screen time with these boring side characters genuinely made the movie such a drag to watch, and talking about it makes me want to gouge my eyes out. I hate this movie. I hate these characters. The animation sucks. There's nothing redeeming. And I mean, if I wanted to watch the third installment of an ongoing franchise centering around talking animals joining the circus, I would just watch Madagascar 3. I know it's a bit early for this, but this movie is so bad, bro. Get this shit in the bin. Okay guys, this might be a huge hear me out, but hear me out. Smurfs could be worse. I know. For how bad everyone makes this movie and the sequel out to be, I didn't find it that insufferable. Sure, the Smurfs are obnoxious and annoying, and the plot feels deprived of any common sense or value, but hear me out. Gargamel is the greatest character ever written. Okay, let me actually explain the plot. So the Smurfs are these blue mystical creatures that live in the Smurf village, but then Gargamel, who's this evil wizard guy, is trying to steal the Smurf essence, which is what powers his magic. Then this clumsy ass Smurf named Clumsy leads Gargamel to the village, which causes the Smurfs to all run away and panic. But then Clumsy runs off to the wrong way and goes through a magical portal, leading him and a bunch of other Smurfs and Gargamel to New York City. New York? What happened to the old one? No, cut that out. This is where all the Smurfs somehow end up in the apartment of none other than Barney Stinson. Wait, never mind, that's Patrick. And the Smurfs pretty much live with Patrick and his wife trying to find their way back home. Gargamel is also trying to find the Smurfs, and he ends up getting jailed because he causes mayhem at some toy store. But Gargamel just uses the power of flies to escape, and it somehow works. Like, Gargamel is genuinely the best character of this entire franchise, and I'm tired of pretending he's not. Anyway, so the Papa Smurf finds the spell book located in an antique store, but then Gargamel intervenes, transfers the magic to his dragon wand, and then captures the Papa Smurf. The Smurfs then all track Gargamel down in Central Park, where the Smurfs decide to pull an Avengers Endgame and summon all the village Smurfs through portals. Clumsy then catches the dragon wand and uses it to thwart Gargamel. Gargamel also dies. To the end. Yeah, Smurfs was honestly such a goofy movie from start to end. Aside from the fact that the plot feels so shoehorned in, it didn't really feel like this movie tried at all to be anything. This felt like a really Illumination-esque Sony movie, to be honest. Like, watching this or Minions would give you pretty much the same amount of value for your time. So just for that, D tier. Honest to God, I'd never heard of this movie before making this video, but Jesus Christ, this is the most underrated Aardman movie of the century. Arthur Christmas was such a vibey and fun movie, and I definitely think this is worth a watch at least once. The movie centers around this guy called Arthur Claus, who's basically part of the Santa family which operates in the North Pole, passing down the role of Santa through generations. We got this guy called Steve who's trying to live up to the Santa name by using new technology to speedrun delivering presents to people, but turns out Steve missed one kid, and this alerts Arthur to try and deliver the present. Yes, you heard that right, the stakes of this movie hinges on literally one kid not receiving a Christmas gift. So then Arthur teams up with Grand Santa on their rickety ass sleigh to try and deliver the present back to the said kid. At one point, Arthur literally ends up in Africa, of all places, and also the place where the kid lives, but in Mexico instead of the mainland Britain, which I thought was super funny and clever. Eventually, Steve, Santa, and Mrs. Claus get on the Christmas spaceship to try and deliver the present before Arthur does, but then they also fuck up and go to the wrong Mexican address. I found this bit so funny for no reason. At the very last second before the sun rises, Arthur and the family eventually reach the house in England, and then they argue about who should deliver the present, before my boy Steve finally comes to his senses and lets Arthur fulfill the job. And then Arthur becomes the new Santa, I think. So yeah, Arthur Christmas is a nonsensical, goofy Aardman Christmas movie, and it is really goddamn good. I don't think it's as good as some people graze it to be, but it's definitely good, and that's something. I still think it's funny how this movie just decided that it would be nighttime in every country during Christmas and just completely disregarded time zones. But anyways, yeah, A tier. Pirates, whichever one of these two names, was an absolute fire movie. I have no idea how they do it, but Aardman is still so undefeated in almost every movie they put out. So Pirates Band of Misfits, which is what I'm gonna be calling this movie from now on, is about this group of pirates led by this guy called Pirate Captain. And yes, that is his actual name in the movie. Pirate Captain is trying to win the award of Pirate of the Year, so him and his crew starts pillaging a bunch of random ships in search for treasure, till they come across Charles Darwin himself, of all people, and Charles notices the captain's dodo bird, Polly, and promises riches for discovering it and coining it as the last dodo bird alive. Charles suggests that they enter the Scientist of the Year contest to try to make bank off of Polly, and so the crew all go there disguised as a bunch of scientists, and then they win, but it turns out that the prize they get isn't actually money but a bunch of encyclopedias. Queen Victor is also the main villain, and she discovers that the pirates aren't actually scientists and threatens to kill the captain, but they get pardoned because Charles noted that only the captain knew where Dodo was at. Eventually, Queen Victoria offers a bunch of money as a trade for the dodo bird, to which the captain agrees on, and then he becomes Pirate of the Year, but not really because the dude also gets pardoned, so then they kick him out. And then in an effort to get Polly back, they discover that the queen only wanted her because her ulterior motive was to eat Polly in this club where world leaders eat rare endangered animals. God damn, that is a dark and intriguing plot twist. Anyways, Charles and the captain venture out to the blimp and fight Queen Victoria to get Polly back. The whole pirate gang also show up, and together they rescue Polly while banishing Queen Victoria. The end. Yeah, this movie was great. Aardman has now officially gone 2 for 2 so far. I'd even argue that this movie was way better than Arthur Christmas. All the characters in this one were so charming and made for some really funny jokes, like the whole pirate crew for example, and Charles and his monkey, who were all super interesting to watch the whole way through. The story in this one is also quite funny and absurd in some moments, but I think it works towards this movie's favor. Like, I swear some of these jokes come completely out of left field and are so out of pocket. I'll give it an A tier. I don't care what anyone says, I love this movie. Hotel Transylvania is such a wacky concept for an animated movie, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. This movie takes place at, you guessed it, Hotel Transylvania, which is this huge hotel built by my boy Count Dracula as a safe place for monsters and several different horror movie trope characters to hang out away from humans. We've got such classics as Werewolf, Frankenstein's Monster, Hot Invisible Man, and 2017 YouTube Slime Blob. Side note, but I still find it so hilarious that this main cast is literally just Adam Sandler and his group of friends acting as the whole monster group chat. But anyways, so Drax's daughter Mavis is turning 118, and so Drax throws a big party at the hotel. Coincidentally, this human kid named Johnny stumbles into the hotel thinking nothing of it. Drax then disguises Johnny and tries to kick him out, but he falls in love with Mavis and becomes popular in the hotel. Drax and Johnny also bond over a flying table chase, and then Drax tells Johnny his whole backstory about why he hates humans. This whole moment where he explains how his wife was murdered was actually pretty sad and emotional, so props to this movie for that. Somehow Johnny and Drax just have great chemistry as well, which made the whole scene a lot better. Anyway, so Mavis's party happens, and then there's this big liar reveal thing where all the monsters realize Johnny is a human and that Drax lied all along. Johnny becomes depressed and leaves the hotel, and then Drax realizes that he made a mistake and flies to Johnny's airplane as a bat to convince him to come back to the hotel and be with his goth girlfriend Mavis. Also, we get this dance party ending to end off the movie. All in all, Hotel Transylvania was a fun ass movie. Sure, this movie didn't really try to be anything different or break any boundaries within animation, but I still find it to be a great step forward in Sony's direction. The jokes were very funny, the story was alright, and the characters were also pretty interesting and had great development. So just for that, B tier. The Smurfs 2 is a movie that is very on par in terms of quality as the Smurfs 1. Deadass, the most surprising thing about this movie is how on earth they got Neil Patrick Harris to agree to do a sequel to this absolute shit show of a franchise. But anyway, so Smurfs 2 starts by Lord dropping us the origins of Smurfette and how she was created by Gargamel as a ploy to capture the Smurfs for their essence. Also in this movie, Gargamel is now a famous magician celebrity and is touring around Paris, and he basically creates these evil grey Smurfs to become his sidekicks or something. Gargamel then creates a portal and kidnaps Smurfette on her birthday to try and get the Smurf formula out of her and create infinite Smurfs to use for his magic essence. To this day, I still don't get what the fuck Smurfs are even supposed to be. Like in all these movies, Gargamel keeps trying to capture them because apparently they're magical, but the movies never really give any backstory as to why Smurf essence is so powerful and how Gargamel came to know about the Smurfs. But I'll get back to that later. So anyway, the Smurfs return to Patrick's NYC apartment and call for his help along with this new character called Victor, who's supposed to be Patrick's stepdad. And the Smurfs somehow convince this guy and his wife and kid to travel to Paris to help them get Smurfette back. I have no idea what kind of salary Patrick has that this man can just take a break from his job to go to a different country and help these blue little assholes, but it's probably somewhere in the 6 figures. So the gang reach Paris and Patrick and Victor attend one of Gargamel's shows to distract him while the Smurfs try to find Smurfette. Smurfette also escapes but then befriends the other 2 Smurfs created by Gargamel. Gargamel then returns and forces Smurfette to hand over the formula as the 2 other Smurfs were dying due to a lack of Smurf essence. The Smurfs then arrive but get captured by Gargamel and get put inside the Smurfelevator, named aptly like a machine Doofenshmirtz would make. And then Patrick and Victor arrive and destroy the Smurf Smurf elevator, causing everyone to get blasted out of Gargamel's lair. The Smurfs then all return to their village and celebrate Smurfette's birthday, and the end. Yeah, without a doubt, Gargamel is still the best part of this whole thing. The fact that they utilized his character more in this movie gave me a lot of hope that this would be better than the first, but this movie is still bogged down by the worst plot I've ever seen, as well as the most boring middle act. There is so much filler where the main characters are just in Paris doing jack all that I'm convinced this whole movie was just a disguised tourism ad for Paris. Like, they could have used this movie to explore more of the backstory behind Gargamel and the Smurf essence, but they just don't use any of that, and it's kind of a waste. D tier. Cloudy 2 was a solid attempt at making a Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs sequel. Keyword solid. Like, yeah, it's decent, but honestly the first Cloudy movie was just on a whole nother level compared to this movie, which kinda makes sense, I guess. This whole thing did just feel like an unnecessary sequel. But all that aside, this movie begins with Flynn Knockwood taking up a job for this company owned by his childhood hero named Chester V. Chester V then reveals to Flynn that his Flumster machine is actually still alive and is creating these weird mutated food animals that now populate his own town. Side note, but these food animals kinda look like AI brain rot characters, which I find kind of funny. Anyways, with the help of the old gang, they all reunite and go over to the town to try and stop the machine from generating more food monsters. But then while on the island, Sam finds out that the food monsters were actually only hostile towards people wearing the vest of Chester's company and were actually passive to everyone else. Eventually, the whole gang finds out that Chester is actually evil and had plans to use all the food generated from Flint's machine as ingredients to form a food bar. Then Flint rescues his friends and with the help of the food animals, beat up Chester and literally devour him alive. Then everyone returns back to the old town, which now has humans coexisting with the food monsters. The end. Yeah, honestly, this movie was not too shabby if I do say so myself. Though the writing and storytelling weren't as good as the first, it still didn't feel too disconnected from the first movie, and definitely still brought something new to the table. Though I will say I found it really weird how most of the side characters in this one were just really one-dimensional, and how Flint was extra brain dead to not believe them at all despite him being supposedly really smart. But all in all, it's still a really okay movie. B tier. Hotel Transylvania 2 was just okay. I honestly do feel like this franchise just kind of gets worse every movie, but I mean, it's a steady decline, so it's not that hard to watch just yet. It still highly amazes me how Adam Sandler can get all his friends this much Hotel Transylvania movies. But anyway, so this movie starts after the events of the first one, where Mavis and Johnny are now married and have a kid called Dennis. Mavis and Johnny basically just visit Johnny's hometown, while Drac and his monster gang pretty much kidnap Dennis and try to train him into becoming a vampire. Mavis also then invites Johnny's family for Dennis's birthday party. Unbeknownst to Drac, Mavis also invites his father, called Vlad, voiced by Mel Brooks, who's basically a vampire that hasn't adjusted to not hating humans yet. He then finds out about all the humans and then crashes out and sends a bunch of his bad servants to try to kill them. This is when Dennis's vampire instincts kick in and he basically whoops their ass. Then Vlad forgives Drac and they have a dance party ending because of course they do. So yeah, overall Hotel Transylvania 2 was alright. I especially liked how this movie focused more on Dennis and how the gang basically tried everything to get him to be a vampire, including throwing him off of a tower. This was all pretty fun to watch. And the animation remains as expressive as the first. B tier. Goosebumps is yet again another mid-tier Sony movie, which is what I'm starting to associate a lot of this studio with. Yeah, I don't really know what was up with this one, but I didn't really vibe with it as much as I thought. Probably because I don't have that much sentimental value to the Goosebumps franchise. So the plot of this movie goes like this. This kid named Zach moves into this brand new neighborhood and falls in love with his neighbor Hannah. But Hannah has this creepy ass dad and he hears screaming coming from the house. So then he investigates with this other kid I forgot the name of, and they pretty much find a collection of Goosebumps books, revealing Hannah's father to be R.L. Stine himself. Then they open it all and the Goosebumps characters come to life, led by this dummy called Slappy.
Who are you calling dummy?
And so all the titular Goosebumps characters basically get released into the world, and the main gang, including R.L. Stine, has to contain all of them. Turns out that R.L. Stine pretty much has superpowers in this movie, as his written creations come to life due to his magical imagination. There's also a plot twist revealing Hannah to not be real this entire time and was instead written by R.L. Stine to cope with his loneliness, which is honestly pretty sad. In the end, they imprison all the monsters back to their manuscripts by basically having R.L. Stine write up an ending for them. Then R.L. Stine brings back Hannah by writing her back into the world, and the end. Yeah, Goosebumps was pretty alright. It felt geared towards older kids compared to most other Sony movies, and the whole adventure they went on around town while being chased by the monsters was probably the most entertaining part of the movie for me. I also thought having Hannah be basically a ghost only existing due to R.L. Stine's writing kind of a smart plot point, but other than that, this movie ain't all that, bro. C tier.
I
as the werewolf blood courses through.
Open season Scared Silly felt surprisingly more like an open season movie than open season 3 or 2. Like, just having Shaw come back was already enough to solidify this as the true open season 1 successor. So open season Scared Silly is a Halloween movie, I think, and it basically just revolves around this non-existent werewolf that Shaw is trying to hunt. That was actually just the Patrick Warburton dealer this whole time. They pretty much reopen open season, and Shaw decides to team up with 2 other hunters to kill the werewolf as well as take revenge on Boog and Elliot. From here on out, there's like 30 minutes of pure filler where the main cast literally just does nothing interesting. The stupid wiener dog decides to also become an opera singer, and this scene went on for like way too long. Eventually, Shaw just dresses up as a werewolf to try and hunt down Boog, but he basically just beats the crap out of Shaw and gets him arrested. Yeah, there's not much more to talk about here. Somehow this is genuinely the second best open season movie, and it's the 4th and most recent one. I have no idea how it took them this long to get it right, but this being the second best open season movie still doesn't make it that good. Elliot is still a deadbeat dad like he was in the other movies. All the characters were still hella forgettable and also extremely useless. Shaw is honestly the only thing worth watching for, just like in the first. This guy is still super funny and zany while on screen. But yeah, thank God I am done with reviewing this wretched franchise forever. D tier. Surf's Up 2 is a movie that has no right to exist and definitely 100% should not. Literally, the sole driving force that created this movie was the fact that WWE offered Sony a shit ton of cash to turn Surf's Up into a product placement. And yes, there are other movies that are basically just WWE ads. This ain't the only one. So the plot of Surf's Up 2 goes like this. Cody is still living on Pengu Island after losing in the first movie. And then all these famous WWE wrestling icons show up and basically are trying to scout a replacement for Mr. McMahon. Then the group pretty much go off on this crazy adventure with the most boring ass plot. The Hang 5, as they call it, are pretty much the most one-dimensional insert characters that are glazed by literally everyone in this movie.
You can't see me.
Then eventually Cody does a selfless act and saves Tank, which gets him in the Hang 5. And then he just declines it anyway, and then you know what? I don't even know anymore. Movie over, bro. I absolutely cannot stand the sight of this movie. It is so ignorant, forgettable, and absolutely takes a piss on everything the first movie built and stood on. All of these characters are so insufferable and have no real personality, especially Cody, who somehow became more annoying as if this guy learned nothing from the first movie. F tier. Absolute trash movie. Smurfs The Lost Village is a huge ass fumble for Sony Animation. Like, this movie genuinely had the right art direction and animation, but just lacked any kind of substance and everything else. It aches me to say that this movie felt so mid and wasted. So Smurfs The Lost Village starts out and promisingly introduces the whole Smurfs world war, with Smurfette being created by Gargamel and all that. And then after Smurfette almost gets captured by her, she notices more Smurfs, which Gargamel is also trying to capture to take their Smurf essence. This is the most bare bones ass plot, but at least it's not a shitty Smurf live action movie anymore. So then Gargamel learns of these other Smurf creatures and finds out their location. Papa Smurf then grounds Smurfette, Clumsy, Hefty, and Brainy for sneaking out, but then they sneak out again anyway to find the lost Smurf village and warn the Smurfs of Gargamel. What follows after this is, no joke, 30 minutes of the most boring and monotone Smurf adventure going to this goddamn village. Like, I cannot tell you what happened because I zoned out like 10 times while watching this godforsaken movie. At one point, they literally save Gargamel from drowning and then get betrayed by him, all in the span of like a minute. This somehow leads to them reaching the village before him, and what do you know, the whole village turned out to be this tribal Smurf girl village. Anyways, the Smurfs then try and scout for Gargamel, which unknowingly leads him to the village, capturing every Smurf there except for Smurfette. Then Smurfette shows up in Gargamel's lair and convinces him that she's evil for some reason, and then Gargamel absorbs her powers, which somehow explodes the whole lair, freeing all the Smurfs. Smurfette also gets turned to a lump of clay and dies. Except no, because she doesn't actually die and gets resurrected at the Smurf funeral. Why? I honestly have no idea. Yes, this is actually how the movie ends, by the way. It's genuinely the most anticlimactic, low-stakes ass third act of any movie ever. Not only is the climax of this movie so nonsensical and stupid, but this movie also does something that I can never forgive it for. That being turning Gargamel into a shadow of his former self. Like, my god, did they nerf Gargamel hard in this one. But yeah, aside from that, the animation in this movie actually looks insanely good. It's kind of like a more tasteful version of Trolls from DreamWorks. But other than that, don't watch this movie. C tier. The Emoji Movie is not a movie. I refuse to believe it is. This is what you call an amalgamation of useless
Candy
product
Crush
placement,
Saga.
outdated memes, and the most out-of-touch plot I've ever seen in a film.
Huh?
Whoa, no way, Chaze thinks the Emoji Movie is bad? Surprise, surprise, who could have guessed? Despite what all you guys think though, this is not Sony's worst. It's far from being the best, but how many of you guys also expected me to give this movie the bin treatment? So the Emoji Movie is about this emoji who sucks at doing his job of being on meh face and figures out he's actually glitched or something. He teams up with this absolutely horrifying high five emoji voiced by James Corden, who could also go die in a fire for all I care. And then they meet this hacker emoji who falls in love with Jean. Jean being the name of the main emoji guy. We also got the B-plot of the main kid who owns the phone trying to go to the phone store to get its factory restarted because Jean malfunctioned. I have no idea why you need to go to the phone store to reset your phone, but okay. And then in the very last second, the emojis fire off Jean to do whatever this is supposed to be, and that somehow convinces the kid to not reset his phone, and he talks to the girl he likes. And that's honestly about it for the plot. It seems really straightforward and boring because I removed like 90% of the useless filler of the gang playing Candy Crush or them also playing this little unknown indie game called Just Dance. I am very disappointed with this movie because it's not even a movie that's funny bad. Instead, it's just a movie that makes me want to curl up into a ball and never watch movies again. I sure hope all the money raised from this movie funded all those underpaid artists over at your team, Sony. Greedy bastards. F tier.
Life is good.
The Star is a laughable excuse of a biblical movie if I've ever seen one myself. As a professional Bible lore historian and the proud owner of a signed Bible, I have to say, what in God's name were Sony thinking making a fucking dove and a donkey the main character of the story of Jesus' birth? I honestly don't even really know anymore. So The Star is about this donkey and his dove friend who basically foiled the evil plot of the king sending this hitman to kill Jesus. For most of the movie though, they do literally just sit there or wander around casually stalking Mary and Joseph. Look man, if you know your Bible lore, you don't have to watch this movie. In the end, the stupid ass donkey decides to save the two evil dogs who was working with a hitman guy, and then Mary gives birth, and that's all I could honestly remember. Everything I watched from this movie just kind of went through one eyeball and passed out the other. I mean this when I say this might be the lowest form of Sony movie possible. You literally do not get any value from watching this, and it just kind of takes a big old dump all over the source material. This movie is boring, worthless, and has literally nothing of interest for me to talk about. I don't even think little kids would find this at all entertaining. This is basically just a waste of space 3D animated slop Bible movie. E tier. Peter Rabbit is a movie that I actually really appreciate in the trying times we're in with how mid Sony's catalog has been so far. I went into this movie with no expectations, expecting it to be a similar movie to Garfield or even the Smurfs. But weirdly enough, this whole movie actually subverted my expectations. So Peter Rabbit is basically about Peter Rabbit and his whole gang of rabbit accomplices and their main goal, which is to ravage this vegetable garden in the house next to their tree. One day, a new owner named Thomas is brought in, and the rabbits basically commit whole acts of terrorism against him in order to steal food like electrocution, blunt force trauma, and at one point a full-on bombing. There's also this girl called Bea who Thomas falls in love with, and Peter Rabbit basically just bombs a tree, causing it to fall on her house, framing Thomas and making them break up. I genuinely cannot make this up. This rabbit might just be a spawn of Satan at this point. Then the rabbits feel bad, and so they convince Thomas to return to Bea, and Peter Rabbit takes the blame for destroying Bea's house. And after that, all is well. The end. By the way I describe this movie, you may think to yourself, wow, that was the most nonsensical plot I've ever seen in a movie. And you'd honestly be right. But the absolute humor and jokes put into this movie elevated to such a high level. I was so amused with the slapstick humor in this movie because of how different it was compared to other Sony movies. The writing is also exceptional here and honestly managed to carry James Corden's acting. So yeah, if you guys want to watch a full-length Tom and Jerry-esque movie about rabbits, Peter Rabbit, B tier. Hotel Transylvania 3 is a movie that can be summed up in 2 words, and those 2 words are holy mid. I am honestly just so done with Sony's whole catalog. Like, each one of these movies just somehow one-up each other in midness. But yeah, anyway, so Hotel 3 starts off with showing us the backstory to the main villain in this movie, Abraham Van Helsing. And he's basically an op to all monsters and has the main goal of hunting down Dracula, but his plan just fails every time. Fast forward to the present day, and Mavis decides to book a monster cruise to spend time with Drac and the family. The whole Transylvania gang then board the cruise ship, and Drac falls madly in love with the ship captain named Erica. But as it turns out, she's actually the daughter of Abraham Van Helsing himself, and she's gotta kill Dracula because plot needs to happen. Erica eventually falls in love with Drac after going on a date with him. Then Abraham Van Helsing unveils his evil plan, which is just summoning this kraken and using angry music to kill all the monsters or something. Then Dracula and Johnny just counter him by playing the fucking Macarena. And then Van Helsing has a change of heart, and then Drac and Erica live happily ever after. The end. Yeah, this movie was nothing more than another waste of space sequel for Sony. I can't even exactly exactly call it a bad movie either, but its whole plot is so thin and predictable that I just kind of felt empty while watching this whole movie. Put it in C tier. So Goosebumps 2 Haunted Halloween is a movie that weirdly takes place in the same universe as the first, but with no recurring characters aside from Slappy and Jack Black R.L. Stine. And Jack Black for some reason only has like 4 minutes of screen time in this movie. Yeah, I have no idea why this movie was even written this way, but it was definitely a lot worse than the first. So Goosebumps 2 revolves around these 2 kids I forgot the names of, and they basically ransack this haunted looking house and uncover a lost R.L. Stine ventriloquist dummy. I'm sure you all know where this is going from here. Slappy then comes alive and starts trolling the people in these kids' school, and then the kids decide to throw Slappy into a river to try and kill him, which obviously doesn't work because this motherfucker can teleport. Slappy then turns against them, and then he does the thing he did in the last movie where he basically brings all the Goosebumps characters to life to terrorize the town. Yeah, by this point this movie basically becomes a reskin of the first Goosebumps, but instead of R.L. Stine and these teenagers being the main protagonists, they shifted to this girl and these kids who's kind of like Greg and Rowley in a different font. In the end, they just use like some manuscript thing which resolves the whole Goosebumps book and deletes all the monsters from the town. R.L. Stine also shows up and does absolutely nothing. I have no idea why he's even in here. Like, he's dead ass so useless to this whole plot. Anyways, yeah, that's basically Goosebumps 2. In my opinion, I don't recommend you guys watch this if you've already seen the first one, because the whole plot is basically just recycled, and none of these new characters really offer anything different either. So for that, D tier. Yeah, it's pretty good. S tier. Moving on. Whoa, okay, hold on a second. Seriously though, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is nothing short of a 10 out of 10, and I mean that wholeheartedly. Spider-Verse 1 may just actually be one of the greatest things to be ever made by humans, right next to the wheel, of course. And I mean that in an ironic and metaphorical way. This movie is technically the equivalent of reinventing the wheel in modern animation, and it also marks the start of Sony's golden era. It only gets better from here for Sony Animations. Everything in this movie is done so imperfectly perfect that it made me actually almost cry on my first watch. The niche little details like Miles being animated at a lower frame rate than the other characters, the added imperfections in the background making it look like a panel straight out of a comic book, the sound being implemented so well with the use of underground hip-hop and record scratches mixed in with orchestral motifs, the characters and their depth, motives, and personality. It just kind of makes you appreciate this movie even more. And this is just part 1 of this trilogy. There's 2 whole other Spider-Verses. I mean, well, technically 1 still in development, but I'm still super hyped anyway. Okay, so this movie starts with an introduction of Spider-Man and then cuts to Miles Morales, who is a 14-year-old kid in high school. He hangs out and does cool graffiti stuff with his Uncle Aaron, who's pretty much this universe's version of Uncle Ben. Uncle Aaron also teaches Miles how to Riz grows up, which is a very important detail that will come back in the future. But then Miles gets bit by a radioactive spider and gains his spider powers. He then discovers the actual Spider-Man fighting Kingpin along with a Prowler and trying to stop them from turning on a collider. Unfortunately, because Miles interferes, this gets Spider-Man killed, but before he dies, he entrusts Miles with a USB to stop the collider. So now with Peter Parker dead, Miles basically tries to become the next Spider-Man, but fails horribly at first, until this alternate dimension Peter Parker shows up in his universe. And this different Peter Parker is basically this washed up, out of shape version of Spider-Man who's also depressed. Then Peter and Miles basically infiltrate the lab to try and retrieve data to stop the collider. This is when they meet Gwen Stacy Spider-Man, or Spider-Woman. Then the gang all head to Aunt May's house where they meet all these other Spider people. We've got anime Penny Parker's Spider-Man, fascist hating Spider-Man Noir, and last but not the least, Bugs Bunny John Mulaney Spider-Pork.
What's up, Doc?
But these guys basically just shut Miles off and tell him he's not good enough to fight the Kingpin. We then get this epic plot twist where Miles goes to his Uncle Aaron's apartment, only to find out that he's actually the Prowler. And let me just say, the music in this scene is so freaking cool, man. And then Kingpin's whole team follows Miles back to Aunt May's house. Miles then reveals his true identity to Prowler, which gets the Prowler killed as Kingpin shoots him. Honestly, not bad for a first canon event. Then the rest of the Spider people basically leave Miles to go fight Kingpin. But then Miles breaks free and instead decides to take his leap of faith. And oh my days, bro, I could actually talk about this scene forever, but this video would be hours long. This whole sequence with Miles jumping and breaking out of his metaphorical glass just shows how much he's evolved through this movie and completes his character arc. The shot with the camera flipped upside down also just shows how Miles isn't jumping downwards, but how he's actually rising up as Spider-Man. And the music is also just chef's kiss. After this scene, Miles rejoins the Spider Gang and they go off to fight Kingpin. One by one, each of the Spider people are sent home, with Miles staying behind to shut off the collider for good. But then Kingpin comes back and starts beating up Miles. Then Miles sees his dad cheering him on and decides to use Uncle Aaron's Riz technique, blasting Kingpin and turning off the collider. Oh yeah, and there was also this end credit scene teasing Miguel O'Hara, which was pretty funny.
You're accusing me of pointing while you're...
So yeah, Into the Spider-Verse is definitely a one-of-a-kind movie that revolutionized animation and broke boundaries in the medium. The absolute balls Sony had to greenlight an entire movie in the non-traditional Pixar or DreamWorks style of animation really paid off, because despite this movie being so visually different, it actually inspired other movies to don on the Spider-Verse style. And those newer movies are absolute bangers, what can I say. The story was also so tightly written and set up the sequel so well. I have no idea how Phil Lord and Chris Miller do it, but somehow their writing is so packed with funny jokes and emotional beats, as well as character arcs that pay off so well in the end, it's astounding. And all the fan service and references to past Spider-Man movies really reward you for being a fan of the character. In the end though, what makes this movie so beautiful is that it's not about Miles Morales. It's not even about Peter Parker, but it's about Spider-Man, and how no matter your gender, no matter your race, ethnicity, religion, or anything, you can be Spider-Man. You can put on the mask. But not literally though. Don't try this shit at home. S tier. Actually, you know what? Screw that. S+ tier. Phenomenal movie. I'm not even playing around. Go and watch this right now. It's like the best Spider-Man movie of all time.
Of all time.
So when I was doing research for this video, the Angry Birds movie 1 just did not exist in the Sony Pictures movie wiki list, which I guess means I'm skipping the first and going straight into the sequel. The Angry Birds movie 2. This might just be the most Illumination feeling Sony movie thus far, and that's not even necessarily a bad thing either. Surprisingly, the writing in this movie is actually pretty good, and the jokes also complement well with Sony's usual expressive and vibey animation style. Let's dive into the plot. So this movie starts with the birds and pigs having an all-out war until this third party consisting of eagles decide to interfere. There's also this evil eagle bird named Zeta who basically plans on inhabiting Pig and Bird Island by displacing the locals using gigantic ice balls. The pigs and the birds then have a peace treaty with each other, and together they form this team and infiltrate Eagle Island. But then as it turns out, the mighty eagle, which I guess is also supposed to be a recurring character from the first, was actually the ex-fiance of Zeta who also abandoned her at the altar. And so the mighty eagle abandons the mission out of embarrassment. Red and the team then infiltrate the eagle base but then fail at the very last second. This is when the mighty eagle comes back and confronts Zeta. But in another plot twist, it turns out that mighty eagle and Zeta had a daughter all along. Red then basically sabotages her cannon, causing it to self-destruct, and then mighty eagle saves their daughter and all is forgiven for him. And then they get married in Bird Island and the end. Also, Red hooks up with Chuck's sister. Yeah, that's the entire plot. It may sound really dumb and nonsensical, but if you just give this movie a chance, I promise you it is actually decently entertaining. The amount of jokes they managed to cram into the runtime definitely made this whole movie for me, even if a lot of the movie is just spent on filler. But honestly, sometimes it's nice to kind of just lay back and just turn your brain off while watching the Angry Birds movie 2 of all movies. You don't even really need to watch the first or play the game to enjoy this one. So just for that, B tier. The Mitchells versus the Clankers was surprisingly a lot better than I remember. On release, I remember seeing this and thinking it was mid and nothing too special. But after being exposed to the other absolute dog shit Sony movies, it's nice to watch this one and actually come out of it feeling 10 times happier. Just the fact that this was directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller too was everything you need to know about this movie. So the film starts out introducing us to our main character, Katie, who's basically an aspiring film student who also has a YouTube channel. Katie is literally me, bro. Except I don't go to film school. She also lives with her dysfunctional family and her dad, who's basically this guy who hates technology. And after a big fight, his dad decides to cancel her flight to college and instead decides to take the entire family on a surprise road trip. Meanwhile, we also have this tech guy who looks like he could be a cross between Mark Rober and Marquez Brownlee. And he basically upsets his AI phone assistant, causing her to go rogue and make all the clankers capture the humans and send them off into space. This starts a robot uprising, and now the Mitchells must survive whilst being hunted down by AI. This scene also further proves why all of us should be extra nice to ChatGPT. Anyway, so after a giant fight scene, the Mitchells befriend two defective robots who help them in planning how to stop the invasion, basically by using a kill code. Then the family basically make it to the robot HQ and disguise themselves as robots to enter undetected. And then the clanker phone decides to play the audio of Katie saying mean things to her dad, which causes her dad to lose focus and foils their plan. This scene was kinda weirdly emotional for me because of how well the characters were developing throughout this movie, and the animation and music in this scene also just looked really great. It's also revealed how Rick, who was the father of Katie, gave up his life in the woods to provide for their family. This gives Katie the motivation to infiltrate HQ again and for some reason uses her dog's face to cause a malfunction in the robots. Rick also discovers this and puts Katie's YouTube channel on full blast, causing the robots to malfunction. The mom also goes Ultra Instinct and slaughters all the robots. And then this final scene where Katie and Rick basically sing Live Your Life while killing all the clankers. Like, this ending is so perfect, it almost brought a tear to my eye, bro. And yeah, that's basically the whole movie. I will admit, I thought this movie did have some pacing problems with how rushed the last act felt, out, but also it makes it feel more human, and that's honestly what we all need considering how prevalent AI swap is in today's economy. And I think this movie will continue to age pretty well. I also have to give a special mention to the animation and the mixed media slash graphics. Holy lord, did they go above and beyond here. Sony really continuing to prove that they are king of animation with these movies. Anyways, in my opinion, I definitely like this more than Cloudy by a tiny bit, so S tier. Absolute banger movie. So Wish Dragon actually decently surprised me. For a movie I went into with absolutely no expectations, I was pleasantly surprised with how much Sony managed to cook with the whole plot and story. That was until I realized after the film ended, wait a second. Isn't this just Aladdin but set in China? But yeah, with the whole obvious comparison aside, Wish Dragon starts out and introduces us to these two characters named Din and Lina, who were childhood best friends until Lina moved away. Fast forward 10 years and Din is a working class student while Lina is a super rich model. Then one day Din is given a magical teapot by this old guy which unleashes a Wish Dragon to grant him 3 wishes. So to get this straight, this poor guy is trying to get with this rich girl using magic genie with wishes. I wonder what Sony's inspiration for this movie was. And then these guys start hunting Din down to get the genie dragon for him, but the plot twist is that these bad guys were actually working for the dad of the girl that he liked. And then he goes on a date with the girl and then they fall in love, but then the girl can't get with Din because of society's expectations and a massive gap in the societal class. At this point I was thinking to myself, damn, okay, Sony was actually cooking like crazy with this story. Like the whole build up to this rooftop scene and how Lina said she couldn't continue seeing Din was actually kind of shocking, not gonna lie. But yeah, from here the movie kind of gets worse. So after Lina leaves, Din gets pissed and wishes to become rich, but the dragon prevents him and basically lore drops his whole backstory about how he was a king forced to become a wish dragon as a punishment. But then before Din could make his last wish, Lina's dad shows up and then dies. And then his goons steal the teapot thing and then the dragon just sacrifices himself to save Din. And then the dragon returns in heaven as a human and then decides to go back to earth to grant Din his last wish, which is to save the dad of the girl, and then they live happily ever after. The end. Yeah, I think you guys can see what I mean when I compare this movie to Aladdin. Admittedly, this movie was still pretty alright and had great emotional beats as well as characters I actually cared for. There's so much soul and effort put into this movie compared to a lot of Sony's catalog that I literally cannot stay mad at it just because it's similar to Aladdin. I mean, I guess it's only right since Aladdin is based off of China, but yeah, Wish Dragon is actually pretty decent. C tier.
When your plane lands on the runway.
Vivo was a movie that had lots of potential but couldn't really manage to go anywhere with it. Like the whole concept of this movie centering around music and the emotional story along with a vibrant animation was a great start, but this movie just fell short once it actually reached the midpoint. So Vivo is all about this monkey guy thing. Wait, hold on, what animal even is this guy? Oh, okay, Kinkajou. So Vivo is this Kinkajou who has his owner who writes music, and he basically has this friend who's a famous artist called Martha that he wrote a song for confessing his love to. So this guy plans to go to Miami to visit his long distance love interest, but then the next day he dies in his sleep. I know, this is a hella sad opening for this movie, and I thought that Sony was gonna cook hard with the plot from here, but it just kinda gets worse. So Vivo meets up with this little girl and they go on a cross-country adventure to the concert to give the song to Martha. There's a whole lot of filler here with the main character singing one too many musical numbers and then passing through the swamp, which took like 30 minutes. Then the Kinkajou finally makes it to Miami and passes the letter to Martha, which inspires her to play the song in her final concert. This final scene here is deadass the only thing that makes this movie worth sitting through, because after how boring the initial plot is, this final scene is actually pretty emotional and is animated really beautifully. Actually, screw that, this whole movie is animated so beautifully. But after this scene, the movie basically ends and there's pretty much nothing else worth mentioning. By far the worst aspect for this movie might have been the characters and the very obvious elephant in the room being the Kinkajou voiced by Lin-Manuel Miranda, which okay, I get it. This guy is known for writing and singing in lots of different movies, but I just found his character a bit annoying, especially since Vivo didn't even need to talk at all in this movie. And yeah, aside from the few songs that sounded decent, a lot of them were kind of forgettable and bland. And the whole time this goddamn monkey was singing, it just kind of sounded like some reject Hamilton song.
If I can prove that I never touched my balls.
So just for that, C tier. Hotel Transylvania 4 was pretty meh. I already reviewed this movie on the channel before pretty briefly, but my opinion still kinda stays the same on this movie. So Hotel 4 starts off with Drac trying to retire and give the hotel to Mavis, except Johnny basically overhears him and overreacts, causing Dracula to crash out and lie to Johnny saying the hotel can only be inherited by monsters. This causes Johnny to turn himself into a monster with the help of Van Helsing, and also somehow causes Drac and the whole monster gang to turn into humans accidentally. I will never forgive them for what they did to my boy Invisible Man, bro. So then Johnny and Drac have to venture off off into some random jungle with Johnny being a fire-breathing monster and Dracula being a human. Kinda like Freaky Friday, but on a Tuesday though. But then the whole gang tracked them down and it's revealed that Drac lied about the hotel the entire time. This causes Johnny to evolve into what is literally Godzilla, and he almost kills Drac, but Drac gives a wholesome speech in the end which makes Johnny spare him. Then the movie ends and shows us that the hotel was destroyed while the whole gang was gone. And the end, I guess. Yeah, the story was not that good this time around. Aside from the animation being a whole lot better compared to the other Hotel Transylvania movies, there's really nothing else to praise about this one. Anyways, I'm gonna wrap this up now because frankly I want to talk about Spider-Verse. Put that shit in D tier. Across the Spider-Verse is nothing short of fucking amazing. Sony genuinely took the sole concept of Spider-Man tropes and the character itself and just told us, hey, wanna see me make an Oscar-worthy animated movie about Spider-Man? Sure. Wanna see me do it again? Like, oh my Jesus, is this movie so much so a masterpiece and definitely so on par on quality with a first. So Across the Spider-Verse starts with this epic narration by Gwen as she basically goes full Buddy Rich on the drums. And we basically just learn about her full backstory in no less than 20 minutes. I do really appreciate how this movie starts off and dives into Gwen's whole lore first, kinda implying that this whole movie is going to have Gwen in a much more major role compared to her role in Spider-Verse 1. But yeah, it basically shows her whole canon event and how her best friend Peter Parker was killed, and her police officer dad basically just assumes that Spider-Woman did it and is trying to hunt her down and arrest her. Then one day this alternate universe Vulture shows up and so Gwen tries to take him down. Then the absolute aura farmer Miguel O'Hara shows up and pretty much helps Gwen neutralize the threat. But then Gwen's police dad shows up and attempts to arrest her. Gwen removes her mask and tries to talk her dad out of it, but Gwen's dad insists that she's guilty, which makes her very sad. Miguel then cages Gwen's dad and offers Gwen a watch, signifying her induction into the Spider Society. With nowhere else to go, Gwen reluctantly joins Miguel. Okay, pause for a second. God damn, are the covers in this scene so beautiful to look at, man. And the absolute sheer emotion and depth between these characters are so thrilling to experience. And the best part is that we haven't even peaked yet when it comes to Gwen's story or this movie as a whole. This was literally just the opening scene. My lord, this movie might just be another 10 out of 10. I'm being so serious. So now we cut to Miles Morales and how he's been living as Spider-Man for over a year. This dude Miles basically encounters the Spot, who's this new villain of the week as Miles calls him. And the Spot is pretty much the supervillain who uses holes to defy the laws of physics and travel through multiverses. His villain backstory is that he was pretty much created by Miles when the collider exploded and was also the person who sent the spider to bite Miles in the first place. Let me just rewind all the way back to Spider-Verse. Look at this cool ass detail when Miles first gets bitten. The spider actually glitches, which proves it wasn't from Miles' universe. If that isn't insane foreshadowing, then I don't know what is. And so Miles stops the Spot before going to his dad's party and getting grounded for being late. Then Gwen spawns in and basically just catches up with Miles on life. Then Miles stalks Gwen and follows her through the Spider Society portal, which transports him to Mumbai, basically just Mumbai, Manhattan. And Miles meets Pavitr, the Indian version of Spider-Man who cannot stand the words chai and tea next to each other. Miles also meets the one and only Hobie Brown, aka Spider-Punk, who's also the second best character in this movie. And then bro decides to save Pav's dad, which breaks the canon. Miles then goes off to Nueva York. He meets up with Miguel O'Hara, who pretty much gives him this big speech on how canon events work and how interfering with the canon causes worlds to get destroyed. And he got all this info by judging off of his own experiences and losing his family in this exact way. He also reveals that Miles' dad is about to get cannoned in 2 days. This causes Miles to absolutely crash out at Miguel and run away from the Spider Society.
All stations, drop what you're doing and stop Spider-Man. Miles, the Black One!
Every Spider-Man then engages in this epic chase scene to chase Miles. This was honestly a highlight of the movie for me. The whole build-up with Miguel's speech and the introduction of the canon laws of the Spider-Verse was the perfect way to set this chase scene up. Miles then reaches the top of this train thingy and tells Miguel nah, he's gonna do his own thing, before absolutely clapping Miguel and going off into his home universe. But plot twist, Miles goes back to the original universe of the spider that bit him, which sends him to this alternate timeline where Unc Aaron is a bad guy, Miles is the Prowler, and there is no Spider-Man because, you know, the spider from that universe bit Miles in his universe. Gwen also reunites the Spider Gang from last movie, and to be continued. This was an absolute devastating ending to all of us back in 2023. But in other words, Across the Spider-Verse is such a good movie, man. The writing is so good that it has layers upon layers, like an onion.
Layers!
Especially with the main plotline revolving around canon events and Miles trying to save his own father. The animation is also even better than the first, with them integrating several more styles and techniques. I just know the animators grinded the hell out of animating all these characters, especially Spider-Punk. Actually, scratch that. I do know they're grinding their asses off because Sony overworked and underpaid them. Goddamn Sony, you guys are a bunch of assholes. But Jesus Christ, man, despite horrible working conditions, this movie never fails to amaze me with how they managed to make use of each second of screen time to provide us with 10 out of 10 dialogue, 10 out of 10 jokes, 10 out of 10 fight scenes, and 10 out of 10 story. Is it better than the first? In my opinion, no. But it's also better than every other Sony movie, and that says a lot already. Sony, I swear to God, man, you better not fuck up the third movie or I will never forgive you. Delay that shit all the way to 2030, I don't care. Just make it good, man. Please. I'm begging you, Sony. S tier. Definitely watch it if you haven't already. Kpop Demon Hunters may just be the most overhyped Sony movie of all time, and I'm not even joking. Before all you guys kill me for saying this, no, I don't actually think this movie is bad. My expectations were just so absurdly high for this, especially with people comparing this movie to Spider-Verse and saying the writing was really good. It's safe to say I went into this expecting to be blown away. But nah, it's just kind of a mid-plot movie with good-looking animation that is definitely not Spider-Verse level. So the whole story is basically about these three demon hunters named Zoe, Mira, and Rumi, who are also in a K-pop group. And they have this quest of fighting against demons who try to escape the Honmoon, which is like this barrier dividing humans and demons. So we got this K-pop group called Hunter X, and they're like hella famous in Korea. But then these new demon boy band BTS type group pops up, and they're called the Saja Boys. They also, of course, have the most banger song in this whole movie, Soda Pop. Like, this song is actually so catchy, bro. You're all I can think of, every drop I drink up. A little soda pop. Sorry. So basically, it's revealed that Rumi is like a half demon and lies about being a human to her entire K-pop band because plot needs to happen. And she basically makes a deal with the front man of the Saja Boys, which is this dude called Jinu, to seal off the Honmoon and keep him as a human. This of course backfires because Jinu betrays her to fulfill his own wishes, and this exposes Rumi to the entire world, causing Hunter X to break up. Oh no, whatever shall they do now? But then within like 20 minutes, they just sing a musical number and Zoe and Mira just forgive her. And then they fight off the demons, and then in the last second, Jinu just sacrifices himself to save her, and the end. Yeah, that is the entire plot. If anything, the whole ending felt a bit lackluster and really rushed. I feel as though the writers just kind of wrote themselves into a corner on this one, because I could also tell like halfway through the movie that Jinu and Rumi would definitely not end up together. The lore building at the start was pretty cool, detailing on how demon hunters have existed for generations. But yeah, this ending with a whole demon concert climax just did not do it at all for me, I'm sorry. On the positive though, the animation in this one is really damn good. I especially appreciate how they animate some scenes in 12 FPS just to make the animation so much more expressive and stylized. And the fight scenes are choreographed so dynamically, they kind of remind me of Mutant Mayhem, if you guys remember that movie. But other than animation, I feel like the songs in this one were actually really catchy and well made. They're just overplayed to the point where I resent each one of these songs. And this whole movie as a whole is just overhyped as well. Still pretty good though. A tier.
Tell me, who do you think?
Fixed is a movie directed by Genndy Tartakovsky, the sole animator and screenwriter of several films and cartoons like Samurai Jack, Dexter's Lab, and Hotel Transylvania. So with this person having this level of talent and experience packed under his belt, his dream movie that he decides to produce all on his own is about dogs having sex. Honestly, I don't even know anymore. So Fix revolves around this main dog Bull, who learns that he's getting castrated soon, and then decides to go out with his dog buddies for one last night of fun. There's also this other dog called Honey, who is the main love interest for Bull, but he has self-doubts that he could actually pull her because she's like a show dog or something. Then they visit a dog strip club. I have no idea how much of this I can actually show on YouTube, but for Sony Animation's first R-rated movie, the animation is actually not as crude as you'd expect. Then the dogs are all taken to the dog pound, which they escape from by pissing in unison. Bull then professes his love to Honey whilst also simultaneously receiving backshots from a fellow hound. No, I am not making this up, by the way. And then later that night, they mate before he gets neutered, and the movie ends with them having kids. The end. Okay, so I know what y'all are gonna say, but this movie is not actually that bad. There's lots of really gross and completely unnecessary scenes here and there, but it definitely never felt like it was pushing it too much with all the gross out humor. And the little plot that there is actually pretty interesting to follow just because of how grotesque and intriguing the concept is. Like, I was genuinely so hooked on the movie because the concept is so funny and outrageous that it became so entertaining. The 2D art style is also weirdly charming and really reminds me of vintage Saturday morning cartoons or something you'd see on Adult Swim. Although I wouldn't recommend this to anyone, if you do watch it, it's at least okay in my books. C tier. After finally seeing every film Sony Animation has to offer, here is my final ranking. In order from best to worst, we have Into the Spider-Verse, Sony's magnum opus 11 out of 10 movie. Across the Spider-Verse, a continuation of Sony's magnum opus that is also a 10 out of 10. The Mitchells vs. the Machines, the funniest Sony movie that also has some of the best writing. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, an absolute timeless classic movie. Surf's Up, a fun, innovative surfing movie with a great story. The Pirates Band of Misfits, a classic Aardman movie about goofy pirates. K-pop Demon Hunters, peak movie with cool animation and banger songs. Arthur Christmas, a fun and jolly Christmas movie also by Aardman. Peter Rabbit, an unironically fun slapstick movie about a terrorist rabbit. The Angry Birds movie 2, honestly a pretty fun and well-written heist movie. Hotel Transylvania, an all-around fun movie with great characters. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2, still pretty good but doesn't live up to the first. Hotel Transylvania 2, an alright sequel to Hotel Transylvania. Vivo, it had potential but kinda just falls short. Wish Dragon, basically just Chinese Aladdin. Goosebumps, a more serious but still okay live-action animated movie. Open Season, basically a Walmart version of Madagascar and Over the Hedge. Fixed, could have been worse, but it's actually quite entertaining. Smurfs The Lost Village, yet another wasted Sony movie that ended up being mid. Hotel Transylvania 3, yeah, this series is kinda just taking the piss at this point. Goosebumps 2 Haunted Halloween, a worse version of the first with a rehashed plot. Hotel Transylvania Transformania, definitely the weakest Hotel Transylvania by far. The Smurfs, a weird live action movie that no one will probably remember. The Smurfs 2, basically the same exact as Smurfs 1, just a bit more forgettable. Open Season Scared Silly, the true sequel to Open Season in my opinion. The Star, a laughably bad biblical movie about some random ass donkey. Open Season 2, just what even was this movie, man? Surf's Up to WaveMania. WWE product placement, the movie. The Emoji Movie. Need I say anything? And finally, Open Season 3. Once again, get in thy bit! Sony Animation is definitely a studio that has made an impact in animation as a whole. They were one of the first studios to actually break boundaries and set standards just from being original and authentic. They realized that copying Pixar or DreamWorks was a formula for being in the shadow and effectively broke out animation techniques and stories like we've never seen before. From the start, Sony has always been true to the medium of animation, and that's what makes them a really respectable studio in my opinion. They didn't lean into trends, they instead started them and inspired other studios to do the same. While I could sit here and argue that Sony definitely has more quantity over quality with how mid a lot of their catalog is, and how they're also known for having terrible working conditions, it's also a lot better to look at the bright side and instead glaze these guys for being the studio responsible for Spider-Verse, which honestly makes all these other shit movies justified. How a studio can have this much inconsistency and quality control still baffles me, but honestly it's all okay just as long as Beyond the Spider-Verse is actually good and does eventually come out. Speaking of Sony, what are those guys up to these days anyway? Oh, they're making a Labubu movie. Jesus Christ.